I would like to begin today with item point A, which is the remote attendance of Commissioner Solomon.
Thank you, Chair Lombardi. I'll just read a couple notes and questions into the record to confirm by our clerk, Mr. Gillig, and by Commissioner Solomon. So the Planning Commission this evening has received a request by Commissioner Solomon to participate via teleconference at tonight's regular meeting for child caregiving purposes, which constitutes just cause under AB 2449. No vote of the Commission is required. Commissioner Solomon, please ensure your camera remains on for the duration of the meeting in accordance with AB 2449's requirements. If a disruption occurs to prevent us from broadcasting this meeting to the public through the remote attendance options, we will not take any action on agenda items until public access is restored. All votes this evening on matters before the Commission will occur by roll call rather than voice votes or raised hands. Mr. Gillig, can you please confirm the following? That the city's regular Planning Commission meeting is currently streaming on a two-way audio-visual platform and two-way telephonic service line. Webcasting is working for members of the public?
Yes.
Can you confirm that a majority of the commissioners are present and appearing in person in chambers at the location noted on the Planning Commission agenda?
Yes.
Can you confirm the agenda clearly explains the options by which the public can participate remotely in tonight's meeting?
Yes.
Can you confirm there is a public hearing on tonight's published agenda?
Yes.
And finally, can you confirm the amount of times that Commissioner Solomon has appeared remotely this year outside of hybrid meetings held under AB 361?
None.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Solomon, you must publicly disclose if anyone over 18 years of age is in the room with you. Will you please confirm whether there's anyone in the room with you?
No one in the room.
Okay, thank you so much, and we're all set. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And it is 6:33 p.m. I would like to call this meeting to order. And also, I should give the land acknowledgement. So let me do that right now. The West Hollywood Planning Commission acknowledges that the land on which we gather and that is currently known as the City of West Hollywood is the occupied, unceded, seized territory of the Gabrielino Tonga and Gabrielino Quiche peoples. And with that, Commissioner Hoopengarner, could you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. Item 3, roll call. Secretary Gillig, may we please have roll call?
Thank you, and good evening, Commissioners. Tonight, Commissioner Jones is absent, so all roll call votes will reflect that. And specifically, all roll call votes will be verbal tonight. There will be no electronic voting. Commissioner Solomon.
Here.
Commissioner Matos.
Present.
Commissioner Hoopengarner.
Present.
Commissioner Carvalero.
Here.
Vice Chair Gregoire.
Here.
Chair Lombardi.
Present.
And we have a 6-member quorum.
Thank you. Item number 4 is approval of the agenda. And I suggest that anyone that makes a motion would also include the continuation of the December 19th meeting minutes and also the continuation of item 10D, which is electrical vehicle charging zone text amendment. Would anyone like to make a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner
Second.
Garner, seconded by Vice Chair Gregoire. And your motion includes the suggested continuations? Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Hoopengarner.
Yes.
Commissioner Matos.
Aye.
Commissioner Solomon.
Aye.
Commissioner Carvalero.
Yes.
Vice Chair Gregoire.
Yes.
Chair Lombardi.
Yes.
And the agenda is approved for January 16th, 2025 as amended.
Thank you. Item 5, as just noted, the minutes from December 19th, 2024, they're still under development, and those are full verbatim minutes. So that will be continued until the the February 6th meeting. Item number 6 is public comments. Do we have any general public comments today?
Chair, we do. I have a couple of public comments here in chambers. If there's anybody Nobody on the Zoom? Nobody on Zoom. We do have a couple in chambers. Our first public speaker will be Chad Kroger. Chad will be followed by J.T. Parr. You will have 3 minutes. Please speak into the microphone with your name and city of residence.
What up, Council? My name is Chad Kroger. We all witnessed the destructive fires that tore through our beloved city last week. Our hearts go out to all those whose houses burned down, and massive props to the firefighters out there working to keep us safe. Next round of brewskis at Sharky's is on us. We have been hugely inspired by all the Angelinos out there being helpful and unified. As we prepare to rebuild, we must remember the importance of citywide unification. We need a symbol, a beacon of hope to serve as a constant reminder. Vin Diesel and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson have been beefing ever since Dwayne called Vin a candy ass. Despite The Rock's faux pas, Vin made numerous attempts to reconcile. He understands brotherhood. And he finally got through to The Rock at the Golden Globes. If these two legends can come back together, anything is possible. That is why I'm calling upon the city to erect 2 statues, one of Vin and Dwayne, side by side, holding hands together as a symbol of epic unity. We can do this, LA. We're family. Thank you.
Thank you. And J.T. Parr, you have 3 minutes.
What up, Council? Just to piggyback off what Chad was saying, I think the fires are going to exacerbate our already existing housing shortage. So I think it behooves you to upzone R1 neighborhoods so we can add density that's much needed for our housing supply. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair, that is our last public speakers for general public comment.
Okay, thank you. Item 7 is the director's report. Do we have a director's report this evening?
Good evening, Chair Lombardi, Vice Chair Gregoire, and members of the West Hollywood Planning Commission, Nick Marisich, Director of Community Development. I have a brief report for you as we kick off this new year with tonight's meeting. And I want to start by acknowledging the devastating wildfires that have been affecting nearby communities in our region. I know that the past week has been a very difficult time for many people across LA County, and I hope that you and your families have been able to stay safe. The City of West Hollywood and its public safety partners are continuing to respond to local wildfire conditions, but in West Hollywood, there are currently no reports of major wildfires. The city is continuing to deploy field staff to assess conditions in the community. While the city has not been directly impacted by fire, the scale of the disaster that is affecting our region is immense, and the city and many community members have been working to support the response and recovery efforts. And in addition to the amazing work of firefighters and first responders, we know that individuals and families are stepping up by opening their homes, donating clothes, and volunteering their time. And we have seen the community coming together in an unprecedented way to support their neighbors in this time of great need. So I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who is playing a role in this enormous effort. The city has set up a website with links to updates on the fires and related community information, which can be accessed at go.weho.org/fireupdates. And of course, you can get information on the emergency from LA County at lacounty.gov/emergency. The city is also offering mental health support during this difficult time through Maple Counseling. There's clinical staff available to provide free and low-cost counseling sessions to West Hollywood community members, and you can call them for additional information at 310-271-9999 or pick up a brochure out in the lobby. Additionally, the LA County Department of Mental Health is providing 24/7 support and resources through its helpline, and more information is available on the LA County website. The city is also encouraging community members to continue taking part in donating to organizations that are in need of contributions. The city has activated its WeHo Responds program to help encourage these donations. And you can find more information at the city's website, weho.org/wehoresponds. As you may have already know, the city has also adjusted the schedule for several events that were planned this month, including postponing the mayoral reorganization and installation ceremony and city council meeting that was originally set for earlier this week. That is now planned to take place as part of the upcoming city council meeting on Tuesday, January 21st. And finally, I do have a couple of planning-related updates for you this evening. On the agenda for that upcoming city council meeting on Tuesday, January 21st, staff will be presenting an item to consider speed limit reductions on various city streets as part of the city's adopted Target Vision Zero action plan. The staff recommendation report can be downloaded from the council agenda posted online at weho.org. We're also preparing to present a Metro K-Line North first and last mile early assessment plan as part of our rail integration planning work. And we're planning to bring that forward to the City Council at their meeting on February 3rd. So please stay tuned for more on that. And then last but not least, on Thursday, January 3rd, that's 1 week from today, staff will be publishing the draft environmental impact report for the proposed project at 1000 La Brea Avenue for a 45-day public comment period. There will be 2 public meetings held during the comment period to solicit comments from interested parties on the contents of the draft EIR. The first meeting will be with the Transportation Commission on February 19th, and the second will be here with the Planning Commission at your March 6th meeting. This concludes my report for tonight. Thank you for your ongoing service to the community, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for our Community Development Director, Commissioner Hoopengarner?
Could you just reiterate the release date on that DEIR?
Yes, the publication date will be 1 week from today on January 23rd.
23rd. I heard 3rd, and I was like, huh? Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? No. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 8 is the consent calendar. There are no items. Item number 9, public hearings, section 1, subject to Housing Accountability Act. We also have no items today. That brings us to item 10A, other hearings that require public hearing. And item 10A is 649 North Huntley Drive. This is a hearing for a proposal to convert an existing 2-story, 3-unit apartment building into a condominium. And I believe we now have a staff report.
Good evening, Chair Lombardi and members of the Commission. My name is Roger Rath. I'm the Associate Planner with the Current and Historic Preservation Planning Division. Tonight, I will be presenting 3 separate subdivision applications, each with its own public hearing. While there are some similarities between 10A and 10B, both involving existing apartment buildings located on the same block and developed by the same applicant, item 10C is distinct. The project is located on Ogden Drive and is currently under construction. Each item will be addressed individually, and I will strive to minimize repetition where possible to streamline the presentation. The presentation before you should take approximately 3 minutes. The first request concerns 649 Huntley Drive, which is a common interest development conversion, also known as a condo conversion. No construction is proposed as part of this request. The subdivision would allow the airspace of each unit to be converted and sold as individual units. The subject property consists of 3 2-bedroom units as identified on the screen, which are proposed to be converted. This slide shows a current view of the property. The building received its certificate of occupancy in December 2018. As previously mentioned, there is no physical changes to the building with this request. This project has been thoroughly reviewed to ensure compliance with all applicable regulations under the zoning ordinance. The development complies with all zoning standards for multifamily residential projects. This includes private open space for each unit, off-street parking with 6 spaces provided, and compliance with lighting, storage, and facade design requirements. Additional details are outlined on page 4 of the staff report. Tenant protections have been addressed in compliance with both the California Government Code and the West Hollywood Municipal Code. The applicant has met noticing requirements under state law. Tenants have been notified of their right of first refusal to purchase their unit at the same or better terms in the general public. Any future eviction must adhere to the city's rent stabilization ordinance and Alice Act regulation, including a 60-day noticing period, relocation fees based on the city's relocation fee schedule, and an owner occupancy requirement for at least 1 year. These safeguards are outlined in Chapter 17.52 of the West Hollywood Municipal Code and reflected in the Condition 8.1 of the draft resolution. The applicant has stated that there is no current intent to evict tenants or sell individual units. However, all protections will remain enforceable should circumstances change. In summary, it is staff assessment that the proposed condo conversion at 649 Huntley Drive meets all required findings, does not impede the implementation of the general plan, and is consistent with the provisions of the zoning ordinance. For these reasons, staff recommends that the Commission approves the subdivision request subject to the finding and conditions of approval in the draft resolution. That concludes my presentation. Me and the applicant are available for any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any disclosures this evening? No disclosures. Okay. Are there any questions for staff right now, or would we like to move on to an applicant presentation or public comment first? Commissioner Hoopengarner, I believe you can go first if you have questions. And Commissioner Solomon, if you have any questions, feel free to use the raise hand icon. If you can find it, I will try my best to keep an eye out for you.
Thank you, Roger. Just 2 questions. One, given the date when this was approved, what was the date when the city began the process of not allowing new developments to have on-street parking? And does this building qualify for that constraint?
Commissioner, I don't have the exact date, but that condition has been applied on projects since at least 2017,
Okay.
2018.
So, well, this is 2018, so that's why I'm asking the question. Because normally, we would require that constraint be clearly divulged in the CC&Rs. And I didn't see that in the resolution, and that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, that condition would have been in the resolution for the development project itself.
But for an owner, potential owner buying that, they're not going to see that original resolution without some extreme digging. They're only going to see the CC&Rs. So in the past, we've always required that be disclosed in the CC&Rs, that any owner of those units would not be entitled to on-street parking other than the 50, one-day passes.
Right. Yeah, the CC&Rs have not been submitted yet. Those will be forthcoming, and that's something that staff can include into this or require into the CC&Rs. Once they submitted it, it would be reviewed by staff as well as the city attorney's office before it gets finalized. So staff can include a condition or include that stipulation in there consistent with other projects.
Well, historically, when we've done a subdivision, we have included it in the resolution so that it's very clear. Mm-hmm. And I don't see it here. That's why I was asking the question.
I'm going to take a look at the resolution to see if there's any language that would address that.
Okay. I went through it. I didn't see it, but I might have missed it. Okay. My second question is about It relates to this property because it's owned by the same people as the 723 property. And we do have a letter from a neighbor discussing water encroachment, tree encroachments, et cetera. Hence my question earlier today, Roger, about, have we verified, since these are built properties, a lot of times we get subdivisions that are, a pigment of someone's imagination. They haven't been built yet. But these are built and occupied properties. So the question is, has staff determined that this property, because this is the hearing we're having, is 100% in compliance with all of the zoning ordinances that we have, including trees and all of the things?
So this project is in compliance with all the applicable zoning ordinances. So there are specific findings regarding the original development. Those are separate from this request. So anything that's outside of that would be covered under the code compliance team, and they would do that purview of the previous resolution and review.
What do you mean previous resolution?
So the previous resolution that allowed for the development and the construction of the building, that's not part of this request.
Correct.
So that approval is going to be covered by the code enforcement team in terms of verifying, make sure that there are no issues with development, maintenance, property maintenance. So there are issues there, like as you mentioned from the public in regards to the water encroachments and also the tree encroachments. They would have to contact the code compliance team to kind of verify that there are no violations to the current condition of approvals with that development.
Okay, so I guess my question is then for legal. I mean, we're being asked to grant this applicant this, subdivision, and I guess my question is are there any constraints if they're not in compliance with X, Y, Z, A, B, whatever of the city ordinance? Is that, or should that in any way be a constraint upon our decision tonight?
I would say it is up to the commission, of course, as a body on whether you can make those specific findings to the tentative track map approval. And to Roger's point, I think to the extent there's concerns or public comment regarding ongoing maintenance or encroachment issues, that is something that would be handled by the code enforcement team. So I would say, the council certainly looks at those tentative track map findings that are specific to just the conversion of the units from rental to subdivision, and whether the commission feels you can make those findings to that component of this hearing.
I guess my question is more around, we're granting a benefit to the applicant, and if the applicant isn't in compliance with whatever possible things that are city laws, rules, regulations, what is that nexus of what should and shouldn't be approved?
Well, I think to Roger's point, some of that is sort of outside the commission's purview relative to this item, because code compliance would certainly receive complaints if there's allegations of inconsistencies. As Roger mentioned, the CDD team, as part of this application, determined that the project was consistent with the zoning code at the time that it's being presented. And so really, my recommendation would just be that, the commission look again at those specific findings to the tentative track map and whether or not those can be made.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so I just wanted to respond to your first question, Commissioner Hoopengartner. In regards to the no parking on streets, we do have that condition as part of the development agreement, the development resolutions that allow for the construction of it. We'll make sure that that gets included in the CCNRs, but that condition is already included as part of that construction of the project. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff? No? Okay. And is there an applicant presentation this evening?
No,
No?
but he's available for questions.
Okay. So then how about public comments?
No public comments.
Okay. And no applicant rebuttal. Then I can close the public comment portion of the hearing, which was very brief, and we can move on to deliberation if there aren't any other questions right now. Would anyone like to go first, or? Okay, Commissioner Hoopengarner?
I'm inclined to improve this. I think my motion, should I make it, would be to include the language about the parking requirement, given that that is so important. So it's very clear to staff, it's in the document, that that should be part of the CCNRs. So that would be my recommendation.
Wait, quick clarifying question, if I may, Chair. Is your motion to, because it's already in the resolution, as staff said, your
No,
motion is to include...
It's not in this resolution. It's in the original development resolution.
Okay.
So this
So
resolution is what entitles the track map.
Your motion is to reference that language in this resolution?
To include that paragraph in this resolution.
And Commissioner Hoopengartner, I think if there's consensus among the body as deliberations go on, we do have condition 4.8 relative to the CCR. So if the commission so inclined, it might just be a reference to, applicable obligations with respect to off-street parking if the commission is in favor as a body on something like that.
Yeah, if you look at 4.8 on page 7, that's what I thought had already been included. So that's why I was saying it's already been included, because it says it right there.
And it doesn't refer to the off-street parking. That's my guess.
It says, prior to the filing of the final map, the applicant shall submit a copy of the covenants, conditions, and restrictions, CCNRs, to the satisfaction of the community development, which must include provisions for maintenance of common facilities and installation of adequate lighting systems for all walkways. So how are you proposing to amend that?
To include the language that it relates to the restrictions on off-street parking.
Oh, yeah, I'm already connected. I mean, yeah, I just need to be able to share this after I do roll call.
And if you want to reference, a specific paragraph in the original resolution, I'm open to, whatever you recommend, but I think it's important, it's a really important restriction in the CCNRs that if it's not called out, could be missed. And it's an easy miss. Staff, you're looking at, here just tonight, you're going to be looking at 3 sets of CCNRs. By including it in the document, it's there, it's part of your checklist, done. That's all I'm requesting.
I don't know if the city attorney has a thought on this, but would you be agreeable to, versus doing all of that, just putting, adding to the part that says which must include provisions for the maintenance of common facilities and installation of adequate lighting systems for all walkways, just adding and off-site parking requirements versus adding a whole paragraph in there?
Well, that's what I just said.
I
said
I thought you were talking about,
either
yeah.
add this or a reference to the paragraph in the original development agreement. So either add 5 words, whatever it takes.
I was saying
in here.
add references to, which must include off-site parking requirements, just
Yes,
putting that.
that's what I said.
I would suggest that we see what legal recommends, and then if the two of you are in agreement to that, just to throw in, my thoughts for a second while we're on this topic. I don't know. I'm curious. I've looked at CCNRs. I have one. I haven't really seen reference to parking usually described in it, but I know that they have to be reviewed by the city.
The older ones didn't have it.
Yeah, I understand that parking, there still were restrictions on parking either way. There's just no mention of it whatsoever. But if that's the standard protocol, I mean, it is a document that the residents would see while they're choosing to make a purchase.
Or rent.
But I don't know how, sometimes these CCNRs are very template, so I'm curious how much staff's actually influencing what's in them.
From staff and my perspective, certainly no issue with either suggestion from Commissioner Hoopengartner or Commissioner Matos to add, in reference to the CCNRs, compliance. I had thought maybe including any applicable obligations or restrictions with respect to off-street parking. And I know Commissioner Hoopengartner, one point was just having that somewhere.
On-street parking.
Apologies, on-street parking. And to your question, Chair Lombardi, the CCNRs are approved through the normal process, but if it's the commission's desire to make that clear in the resolution itself tonight, I don't have an issue with that added clause.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything that they would like to discuss while we're in deliberation? Otherwise, we have a motion and perhaps we have a second. Okay. I think Commissioner Carvalero would like to say something.
No, I seconded.
Oh, you're seconding form. Okay. So we have motion by Commissioner Hoopengarner, including the revisions as just described by legal, and a second from Commissioner Carvalero. Commissioner Solomon, I just want to check on you. Any questions on your end? No? Okay, thanks. Okay.
Thank you. Commissioner Solomon.
Aye.
Commissioner Matos.
Aye.
Commissioner Hoopengarner.
Aye.
Commissioner Carvalero.
Aye.
Vice Chair Gregoire.
Aye.
Chair Lombardi.
Aye.
And the motion passes, noting 6 ayes, Commissioner Jones as absent, approving the resolution number PC 25-1591 as amended. And we do have an appeal process for this item. The resolution the Planning Commission just approved memorializes the Commission's final action on this matter. This action is subject to appeal to the City Council. Appeals must be submitted within 10 calendar days from this date to the City Clerk's office. Appeals must be in writing and accompanied by the required fees. The City Clerk's office can provide appeal forms and information about waiver of fees, and the appeal deadline will be Monday, January 27th, 2025 at 5 p.m.
Thank you. Do we need to place the graphic up on screen, or are we sufficient with this being read into the record?
I'm comfortable with it read into the record, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
And I know we have the graphic, and I think it's in part to ensure we also have Commissioner Solomon there. So I think
Got
we're
it.
good. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So item 10B is 723 North Huntley Drive. Also a proposal to convert an existing 2-story, 3-unit apartment building into a condominium. And can we begin with the staff report when staff is ready?
Hi, thank you for waiting. So this next subdivision will focus on 723 Huntley Drive. This property consists of 3 existing rental units constructed in 2016. Like the prior project, the proposal seeks to subdivide the units into individual condominium parcels. No construction or physical changes are proposed as part of this request. The subject property is located north of 649 Huntley Drive and has the same 3 units with 2 bedrooms each. This slide shows a current view of the property. The project complies with all applicable zoning ordinance, which is detailed on page 4 of the staff report. As with the previous project, tenant protections remain a critical focus. The applicant has met the requirements under the Rent Stabilization Ordinance and California Government Code Section 66427.1. This includes providing tenants with a certified notice of their right of first refusal and adherence to relocation regulation, should any tenants displaced occur in the future. The applicant has stated that there is no current intent to evict tenants or sell individual units. Like the previous project, all protections will remain enforceable should circumstances change. In summary, it's staff assessment that the proposed condo conversion at 723 Huntley Drive meets all the required findings, does not impede the implementation of the general plan, and is consistent with the provision of the zoning ordinance. For these reasons, staff recommends that the Commission approve the subdivision request, subject to the findings and conditions of approval in the draft resolution. I'm available for questions for this one too.
Thank you. Do we have any disclosures? No? Any questions for staff? No questions for staff. I presume we do not have an applicant's presentation today.
That's correct.
Okay. Shall we move into deliberation?
Public comment.
Oh, sorry, public comment. Do we have anyone?
This is Rochelle Abramson.
Yes, we're getting to you. You have 3 minutes to speak. Go ahead and state your name and city of residence.
My name is Rochelle Abramson. I live in Encino. I am the landlord of 729 North Huntley Drive. I'm going to read this email that I wrote. If you prefer to read it, that's fine. So should I just proceed reading it, or?
Just note that you have 3 minutes, so
Okay.
at your discretion.
There are 2 issues regarding 723 that directly impact my property, which I would like to bring to your attention. Number 1, drainage from rainfall from 723 North Huntley goes directly into the subterranean garage of 729 North Huntley, which is my property. I am maintaining sump pumps, which since construction of 723 now function to drain rain from 723 as well as my own property. This is not right. As constructed, the north path of 723, which is next to my subterranean garage, is level, not angled to route water to a 5-inch round drain. Therefore, in heavy rain, the rain does not go down any drain because of no slope on the path, so torrents of rain pour over my garage retaining wall, flooding my garage and overtaxing my sump pump, which cannot cope with the amount of water from 2 properties. Someone, an employee of the construction crew of 723, drilled a round hole beneath the north path, supposedly to drain water. However, there's no slope, so it's ineffective. They would have had to be on my property behind the secure gate to the garage in order to accomplish this drilling. My garage is always secured by a gate, never left open. I had no knowledge of such a drilling, nor would I have approved it. This is a continuing problem since construction of 723. My concrete retaining wall gets thoroughly soaked every time it rains and will eventually crumble due to the original construction. Prospective owners will not be informed of this serious defect, which is destroying my retaining wall. Number 2, ficus trees were planted 3 inches from the lot line. They are now towering above my roof. My building is a 2-story building. Have never been trimmed to reduce the size of the root system. Both my gardener and contractor have informed me that my rear patio is being raised up by the roots of ficus trees, and my concrete retaining wall will soon crack from the continuous pressure from these roots. Prospective owners will not be informed of the liability for the untrimmed ficus. The current owner has shown no interest in responding to my outreach. That's my statement. I hope you have a copy of it.
Thank you, ma'am. And that is our last public speaker. And if staff would like to make a correction, we do have a copy of her email that was forwarded to you. However, it was unintentionally posted under item 10A on the website, and that will be corrected as soon as when this meeting is adjourned.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any public speakers in the room this evening? Okay. How about, is there any desire for an applicant's rebuttal? Yes? Okay. Note that you will have 5 minutes, although if you need more time, we could discuss. And please state your name and city of residence.
Chair Lombardi and commissioners, my name is Haik Mardirosyan. I'm a tract engineer. I worked for this developer for many years. This is the first time that I saw this letter was posted in the website, and I wasn't even aware of this problem that this neighbor brought it up. I just want to make sure that we will get this notice to the developer and the owner to take a look at it. If there is any problem that they caused it, they should correct that problem. I don't see that rooting of the ficus tree will be that strong to remove the entire walkway of the neighbor. But we are more than happy to look at it, and see if we can solve those problems for the neighbors. We just don't want to put it on the side and don't do anything. As I said, this is the first time that I heard, and I haven't talked to the developer or owner about this problem. So I'm just going to make sure to bring it to their attention and see if we can fix this problem.
Okay, thank you.
Okay? Thanks.
Okay, I will now close the public comment portion of this hearing and bring matters back to this commission. Would we like to begin with deliberation, and does anyone want to speak first or make a motion?
I can go ahead.
Commissioner, Vice Chair Gregoire.
I was going to say I see this as posing the same concern that Commissioner Hoopengarner raised earlier, so I would support a similar motion than the one we just approved for the prior property.
Okay, so motion with the adjustments as covered in item 10A with regards to parking and the CCNRs to be added to the resolution.
Sure, and Chair, just to reiterate for the record, the language that was incorporated into that 10A item was condition 4.8, which regards the required CCNRs that, as the planning or CDD team mentioned, is reviewed by CDD with input from legal. So there's an existing condition regarding that CCNRs, and the language included in 10A added a clause that said that the CCNRs, which must include provisions for the maintenance of the common facilities and installation of adequate lighting systems for all walkways, also include any applicable obligations or restrictions with respect to on-street parking.
I would move staff's recommendation with that change.
Okay, do we have anyone that would like to second the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Commissioner Hoopengarner. Any last questions, comments, discussion? Otherwise, we can do roll call vote.
I would just make a comment to the public speaker that this is definitely an issue for code enforcement if it so requires, and she should reach out to code enforcement. Some of the sloping on the walkway issues do look potentially like an original inspection issue. If that slope wasn't done correctly, that's one of my reasons for my questions earlier about compliance, Sorry, I got a frog. So that would certainly relate to the original C of O and the original inspection. So I'll leave that up to code enforcement and the city, but I would think that that would be something that the owners of both properties should be able to work out amicably.
Okay, thank you. Secretary Gillig, would you like to call the vote?
Thank you. Roll call. Commissioner Solomon.
Aye.
Commissioner Matos.
Aye.
Commissioner Hoopengarner.
Aye.
Commissioner Carvalero.
Aye.
Vice Chair Gregoire.
Aye.
Chair Lombardi.
Aye.
And the motion passes, noting 6 ayes. Commissioner Jones as absent, approving resolution number PC-25-1592 as amended. And we do have an appeal process. The resolution the Planning Commission just approved memorializes the Commission's final action on this matter. This action is subject to appeal to the City Council. Appeals must be submitted within 10 calendar days from this date to the City Clerk's office. Appeals must be in writing and accompanied by the required fees. The City Clerk's office can provide appeal forms and information about waiver of fees. The appeal deadline will be Monday, January 27th, 2025 at 5 p.m.
Thank you. Item 10C, 1011 North Ogden Drive. This is a public hearing for a proposal for a tentative tract map for the subdivision of a 3-story, 5-unit multifamily residential building. And we will begin with the staff report.
Thank you for holding, Commissioners. So this presentation concludes our subdivision series with the review of the proposed tentative tract map for 1011 North Ogden Drive. The Planning Commission initially approved the development of this 3-story, 5-unit multifamily residential building as a common interest development in March 2018. However, because the final map was not recorded, the subdivision has expired, necessitating this new request. The building is under construction and is pending final inspection for a certificate of occupancy. It is currently vacant, meaning no tenants are being evicted or relocated. If rental tenants occupy the building before the subdivision conversion, the owner must comply with the rental conversion requirements outlined in the West Hollywood Municipal Code. This project complies with the R3B zoning district and the city's zoning ordinance. The proposed subdivision aligns with the general plan and supports the city's housing goals without detriment to the public welfare. Therefore, staff recommends approval of the subdivision permit as conditioned in draft resolution PC 25-1590. This concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any question alongside the applicant. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Any disclosures at this time? Okay, any questions for staff? No? No questions for staff? Okay, is the applicant looking to present on this item?
No, the applicant is not looking to present anything.
Okay, and I will not forget this time, public comments. Is there anyone wishing to speak?
We have no public comments on this item.
Okay, no public comments. So open and close the public comment portion of this hearing, and we can move to deliberation. Would anyone like to begin or make a motion?
I'll make a motion of approval of staff recommendation.
Okay,
I will second it.
thank you. Motion by Commissioner Mato, seconded by Vice Chair Gregoire. Any final comments or deliberation?
My only question is, are we going to make the same adjustment to 4.3 relating to on-street parking?
Would the motion maker or seconder?
I don't find it necessary, but we can include it.
Okay. So then the request is to modify the motion, and legal can clarify the modification.
Sure. So if it's acceptable to the motion maker and the second, there is a nearly identical term for this item, 4.11, that has that same language about the requirement of submittal of CC&Rs prior to the filing of the final map, and that same existing language, which must include provisions for the maintenance of the common facilities and installation of adequate lighting systems for all walkways. So if the motion maker and the second are in favor, the city could add that same clause as 10A and 10B, which would add a statement that says, including any applicable obligations or restrictions with respect to on-street parking.
Perfect.
Mike, I'd like to make a note that 4.3 and 4.11 are exactly the same, except that 4.3 makes it an obligation of the city attorney, and 4.11 it's an obligation of the community development department. It seems redundant and potentially a conflict.
So what we could do, and then I think we'll essentially, with the pending motion on the floor, ask for formal consent from the motion maker in the second. I think what we could do is strike condition 4.3, and under 4.11 say, prior to the filing of the final map, the applicant shall submit a copy of the covenants, conditions, and restrictions to the satisfaction of the community development department in consultation with the city attorney, which must include provisions for the maintenance of common facilities and installation of adequate lighting systems for all walkways, including any applicable obligations or restrictions with respect to on-street parking.
Yes.
That is fine.
Okay. I'm just going to ask, is there any implication with the previous resolution, which I guess is expired with these changes?
We've already taken formal action. I don't, just for the record, I don't note or have concerns that the two conditions, although duplicative, are inconsistent. So I think we would just proceed with this one and.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we need to formalize anything with the applicant with the changes that we're making?
I'm comfortable we do not. It's essentially an administrative or clerical cleanup.
Okay. So we have a modified motion in second.
Correct.
Okay, any final comments, deliberation, otherwise roll call vote?
Thank you. Commissioner Meadows,
Yes.
Commissioner Solomon,
Yes.
Commissioner Hoopengarner,
Aye.
Commissioner Carvalero,
Yes.
Vice Chair Gregoire,
Yes.
Chair Lombardi,
Aye.
and the motion passes, approving resolution number PC 25-1590 as amended. And we do have an appeal process for this item as well. The resolution the Planning Commission just approved memorializes the Commission's final action on this matter. This action is subject to appeal to the City Council. Appeals must be submitted within 10 calendar days from this date to the City Clerk's office. Appeals must be in writing and accompanied by the required fees. The City Clerk's office can provide appeal forms and information about waiver of fees. The appeal deadline will be Monday, January 27th, 2025 at 5 p.m.
Thank you. Item 10D, as agreed to with approval of the agenda for this evening, is continued to a date uncertain. That is the electric vehicle charging station infrastructures. I do not believe staff has any additional comments at this time, and if not, I'm seeing a no. Then we can move on to item 10E, another zone text amendment. This is a public hearing to consider a recommendation to City Council to require a neighborhood meeting and increase public hearing noticing requirement for new projects seeking development agreements citywide.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioners. As we prepare the screen for you, we wanted to introduce you to our long-range planning intern, Rohan Sharma, who will be presenting the staff report for you today. Thank you.
Please speak up.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Rohan Sharma. I'm a long-range planning intern for the City of West Hollywood. Joining me are Francisco Contreras, long-range planning manager, and Paige Portwood, long-range planning associate planner. The item before you tonight is a zone text amendment for community outreach and noticing for projects requesting development agreements. The contents of this presentation are listed here. We will begin with the council directive, move to the background, then staff recommendations, and conclude with any questions. On May 20, 2024, City Council directed staff to amend the zoning code regarding the process for development agreements. First, Council directed staff to require a neighborhood meeting to be held before any public hearings for projects seeking a development agreement, including standalone billboards. Second, the Council directed staff to expand the public noticing radius for mail notifications regarding development agreements from the current noticing standard of 500 feet to 1,000 feet. Next, staff would like to provide some context about the development agreements and city's authority to enhance public participation in the planning process. A development agreement is a contract between the city and a developer that outlines the specific rules, guidelines, and public impacts of a project. These agreements typically specify significant details like permitted uses, density, and building size. Development agreements are particularly relevant to large-scale projects that may have significant public impacts, including new billboards under the Sunset Boulevard off-site signage policy. Because of their scale, these projects demand heightened community engagement. Moreover, state law governs that basic requirements for adopting development agreements, such as holding public hearings with adequate notice. However, it does not mandate neighborhood meetings as part of the process. In alignment with state flexibility for innovative governance, this gives local jurisdictions like West Hollywood the flexibility to adopt enhanced engagement practices, such as expanding notice, radius, or requiring pre-hearing neighborhood meetings. Staff recommends amending two sections of the West Hollywood Municipal Code. First, in Chapter 19.66, titled Development Agreements, we propose adding a new section, 19.66.020, subsection E, which would require all projects requesting a development agreement to hold a neighborhood meeting no less than 60 days before any public hearing. Importantly, notices for these neighborhood meetings would need to be mailed to all property owners and occupants within a 1,000-foot radius of the project site, doubling the current 500-foot radius requirement. Second, in Chapter 19.74, titled Public Hearings and Notice, we recommend amending Section 19.74.020, subsection B, to expand the public hearing notice radius from 500 feet to 1,000 feet for all projects requesting development agreements. The provisions of this zone text amendment apply to all applications for development agreements that have not had a public hearing before the Planning Commission. This includes any applications that may have been deemed complete. This will conclude my presentation, and I will now pass it over to Francisco before taking any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rohan. And Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioners, we just wanted to provide some clarification and responses to some of the public comments that we had received. There was a comment regarding noticing requirements for the pre-application filing, or the filing that happens before you file an application. And pre-application filing meetings are not required for DAs, they're actually required for specific plans. So we're not dealing with specific plans for this particular zone text amendment, so we don't believe that actually applies in this instance. With regards to a question regarding applying this to projects that have already been deemed complete, we do believe that the intent of the City Council was to capture as many projects as were currently being processed. As part of staff's analysis with the initial directive that was included for Council's consideration, we did state that there was going to be the additional requirements for a neighborhood meeting and additional noticing would add to the approval timeline for these type of projects, and they still decided to move forward with the directive. So we believe it was Council's intention to capture all projects, including those that have already been deemed complete. And then lastly, there was a question regarding the expanded notifications and potential cost of some of that expansion. So we did kind of look for an estimate, and typically for a radius mailing of about 500 or so square feet from a property, it's typically about $800 or so, give or take a few depending on how dense that particular community might be. And then for a 1,000-foot radius, it's approximately $2,500 to, give or take. So it's slightly more, not exorbitant, but we also don't feel that it's exorbitant for projects with outstanding benefits. So with that, we will close and available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any disclosures? Oh, no? No disclosures? Any questions for staff? Commissioner Matos, and then Commissioner Carvalero next.
Thank you. Good job, Rohan. That was great. Quick question for staff. On the first question that you answered that was submitted via public comment, you said that this is only applicable to development agreements and that we're not addressing the specific plan type stuff. Would that require the pre-meets? Is that going to be addressed in a subsequent item, or?
So yeah, the City Council has not asked us to look at specific plans, so we're just looking at development agreements.
Okay. So there's no plan for that alignment?
Correct. Not at the time. Not at this moment. Correct.
Okay.
Commissioner Carvalero.
Oh, thank you. My questions have to deal with the staff report on page 5, and it's about noticing for the design review handout. And I just noticed that you're using the language encouraging, encouraging, encouraging in all three ideas that you're requesting that developers do before they come to design review. I assume this is all still being discussed and is still an open item, given you're using the word encouraging, because that's not definitive.
Right, that's correct. So the city council asked us to look at other avenues to amplify some of the design review meeting notifications. So we're still exploring that, and so we are looking at these particular avenues. So because they're still in development, we haven't mentioned specifically. There won't be any zone text amendments that come along with that. If anything, it's probably more on the marketing side and using the city's existing avenues for communication where we would broadcast those messages. So.
Okay.
Commissioner Hoopengarner?
Thank you. To tag on to Commissioner Cavaliero's question, was there anything to preclude a regular noticing for design review?
For like any type of project? No, not necessarily. We just kind of focused on the...
You're using the word encouraging, but you're not using the word do.
Exactly, right, correct. And we're open to any suggestions. I think the intent of the council was to just use all of our avenues beyond making it a requirement, just,
Well, but I think in my reading of the document, the intent of council was is to actually communicate with the neighbors, and, by extending the radius, it was to communicate. This doesn't say, increase communication for design review. Mm-hmm. This says, if you feel like it, do it. And speaking from personal experience, that isn't going to happen. It's just not. Let's be clear. If it's not a requirement, it won't happen. I've got a project near me where the required noticing for the construction meeting never happened. The meeting never happened. A year has gone by, and only after repeated calls to code enforcement were meetings scheduled a year after construction started, and then they were for at 11 o'clock in the morning that nobody could attend. Mm-hmm. So, in my opinion, this encouraging business is tantamount to useless.
Yeah. And we did try to kind of try as hard as we could decipher the intent of the council. And with regards to the expansion of the noticing requirements and the neighborhood meetings, they were very direct with us, and they asked us to require, right? They said those words: require expanded noticing, require a neighborhood meeting. In the recommendation regarding informing about design review, they use those words, right? Direct staff to consider new ways to inform the community. So I think had they wanted to be very direct and ask us to make a required noticing for neighborhood meetings, they would probably have asked us to do that. So which is why we interpreted that to mean think of other creative ways that we can message that meetings are happening beyond making it a requirement to notice.
Did you explore the opportunity to just say, publish it in the Beverly Press, like other things, which wouldn't require direct mailings, but at least would be an additional notice? Did you explore those types of things?
We did not, Commissioner.
Okay. So my next question relates to this as to in your proposed language on the neighborhood meeting, is that it be prior to the public hearing. That means that neighborhood meeting is subsequent to a design review meeting. And normally our neighborhood meetings for all other developments are required to happen far in advance of that. The whole point of the neighborhood meeting is to get the neighbors' input. And if you wait until after design review and only 60 days before a planning commission hearing, the neighborhood's input has very little potential impact because their feedback will be long past all of the design and all of the development decisions. So I'm curious as to why you are adding this neighborhood meeting, but scheduling it in a way that makes it really not very impactful.
So that was intentional in order for us to capture all of those existing projects that already had a deemed complete application, because those projects would otherwise not be required to have a neighborhood meeting because they may have already been in the process for longer than 60 days.
Could an exception be made for those existing deemed completes as a one-off solution instead of sort of, if you will, bastardizing, the real intent of the language to begin with?
Right, and I guess we were giving the flexibility in those cases for the new permits or the new applications. It's still it's sort of required for those new applications to do the submittal within 60 days of the application. And this honestly was just trying to capture those projects that are through the process at this moment. So we will still capture the new applications with the requirement to do the neighborhood meeting within 60 days of application.
And Commissioner Huppenegger, just to piggyback off what Director Contreras said, I think also because it is tied to the DA component of the project before the Planning Commission hearing, and I know there will be that joint meeting as well to talk a little bit more about the DA between City Council and Planning Commission, but that also does still provide the opportunity for input in that regard tied to what the additional notice, the entitlement the additional notice is tied to, which is the development agreement.
I'm a little confused.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Huppengartner on this one. If the community meeting doesn't happen before design review, how does the design team incorporate those ideas? After design review, you'll get a whole new set of ideas from the neighborhood that might be in sync or might be in contrast to design review. It just seems out of order. And now that we've had this discussion, I feel like this ETA is not completely thought through. I think those things like words like encouraging, which in the past we've always highlighted as something that we don't want to deal with, we want to deal with definitives. Yeah, I'm just feeling like this is not quite there yet, given these questions.
We kind of veered into deliberations.
Yeah, I was about
here,
to say, yeah. That's okay because maybe, I know that Commissioner Solomon has a question, so let's get that out first, and then we can maybe check and see if there's any public comments, and maybe we can have more of a question deliberation, because I think that that's going to be helpful. So Commissioner Solomon, please. Thank you for your patience, by the way.
Thank you. Two questions. First, in regards to on the same topic on design review meetings and also staff meetings. I was wondering if staff had given any thought as to broadcasting those meetings whenever they take place. Clearly, that's not a prior notice of the existing meeting, but I'm someone who personally relies upon WehoTV on YouTube a lot, and I do just think that having those meetings be broadcast and available to the public brings a greater general awareness of them and might improve their sort of efficacy like in the future going forward.
Yeah, that's definitely a recommendation we can bring forward to the City Council for further consideration. So yeah, that's a great idea.
And then the second question is for Isaac. As it relates to the notice requirement in the meetings for deemed complete applications, maybe if you could, my initial impression of that is that we're kind of changing the rules midstream on someone that has a deemed complete application with vested rights. However, we're putting in sort of a new requirement. Isaac, can you give some sort of feedback on why that's legal for us to even consider?
Absolutely, Commissioner Solomon. It is a good question, and this is an exception to our local rules. However, really, it's the council directive is meant to address sort of an atypical situation because of the amount of development agreements that have come down, including those that are still in the pipeline. And it doesn't change the development standards applicable to these projects. It's not impacting, for instance, if you have a project, a billboard project, for instance, it's not changing the development standards applicable to that billboard. It's increased notice and transparency to the community as requested by council versus sort of changing the development standards that are applicable to the project.
Can you kind of give me, and I won't hold you to it, but maybe kind of a rough estimate of how many projects are in the pipeline with deemed complete applications that this new requirement would apply to, and if you're able to do that, maybe break it down between what are billboard projects and what are housing projects?
So we estimate about 20.
Do you know what the breakdown is as between signage versus homes?
All signage. There aren't development agreements for most buildings.
Well, the question is for staff.
They're all signage.
Okay. Thanks. That's all my questions.
Okay, thank you. I've just, Commissioner Solomon, you kind of just touched on this. Just a couple of simple questions here, but something that sometimes I feel has been a little blurry for me in terms of what it really means. What qualifies a project as deemed complete? What is the, when you make a statement like that, what is actually determining when it's complete? What are you looking for? What's the action that occurs?
Yeah, so typically for an application to be deemed complete, an applicant has to meet all the required submittal requirements for a typical project. So typically, those are spelled out in the application itself, which includes things like, adequate site plans, adequate, project descriptions. It's basically the entire package that will be required for the city to do its thorough analysis in order to determine whether it's compliant with the existing code. So sometimes folks submit an application and forget to include, for example, potentially a landscape plan. Well, we can't deem that application complete without having that in it because it's one of the required list of items on our checklist for deeming an application complete.
And is that different than plan check?
That is
yes. That separate?
That's a completely separate entitlement, correct.
Okay, and so you could deem it complete, but it has not even been submitted to plan check yet?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And then typically when we see like a design review or SASE project, it probably has not been deemed complete yet, but it could have been? Because we don't always delve into those matters when we're talking about the design. I'm just trying to understand where all this is occurring in the process and what its implications are for code.
I think Antonio might help us with the deemed complete question for SASE.
Thank you, Chair. When it comes to billboard applications and any application really, there's no distinction between when it goes to design review, either subcommittee, if it's complete or incomplete. So we have, it really depends on where it's at in the process. We bring the applications to the subcommittee when they're ready to be presented to the subcommittee, but oftentimes applications are still incomplete because they might be missing something that is not design related.
Okay, so typically they are not deemed complete yet when we're reviewing them. I wouldn't put you to a number right now, but that's a more common process that we'd see when we're at design review. It hasn't been deemed complete yet, but occasionally it may be deemed complete already.
Right. Most of them, by the time they get to the design review subcommittee, either subcommittee are deemed complete. But there are some instances where they're not because of other information. It could be a soils report, for example, not subject that would be reviewed by the subcommittee.
How about with regards to the specifically projects with development agreements or the sunset advertising projects in particular? Are those usually already complete before they come to SASE? Deemed complete?
My same response. It really depends on the project. Yeah, as Francisco mentioned, the deeming an application complete, there are items oftentimes that are not submitted by the time it gets to design review subcommittee that are not related to the design component itself.
Okay. Then I guess another question I have is, I just want to make sure I'm understanding this fully because I don't think it reads in the code right now. A design review or SASE meeting would not count as a neighborhood meeting. Yes.
For the purpose of a development agreement?
For the purpose of this code change that we're discussing today. They could not count that.
Correct.
As a neighborhood meeting.
Yeah,
Okay.
correct. Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure. And then I guess a hypothetical question. If we have a project that is deemed complete, it's a project with a development agreement, and then it goes to a neighborhood meeting and SASE because it's a billboard project, and then it goes through a substantial redesign. What does that mean with regards to process and neighborhood meetings? How would that be handled? Because previously, we wouldn't have a neighborhood meeting necessarily, and sometimes we don't even have another SASE meeting when the design changes substantially, although we would hope it would, but sometimes we don't. So I'm wondering what it means for neighborhood meetings when that occurs, because these projects are a little, in particular, may change more, it seems.
Yeah, and typically all of our neighborhood meeting requirements are tied to the actual initial application. So if even though they may have redesigned the project, if it's still the same application, then we would only be able to give them or require them to have one of the neighborhood meetings per our existing code. So it's really tied to that one application, even though they might have had multiple redesigns.
Okay. I'll save other thoughts for deliberation. Are there any other questions of staff, or should we see if there's any public comments?
I just have one clarification, Chair. We did want to, just to go back to one of Commissioner Carvalheiro's comments, the sort of comments regarding the encouragement of noticing for design review. So those are not part of the zone text. So the zone text amendment itself only addresses the noticing requirements in the neighborhood meeting, but not the design review noticing or advertising. So those are outside of the zone text amendment itself.
Okay, that helps. Yeah, that makes sense. I just want to follow up on Chair Lombardi's question because I want to make sure that I understand this correctly. If it is deemed complete, it already includes at least a DD level project design? Or is it schematic? Like how complete do the drawings need to be for the application to be deemed complete? I ask because if it's deemed complete and that already has a resolved design project in it, what is the use of the neighborhood meeting? Because are they going to go back and redesign? Or because that just seems not probable.
Right. So Commissioner, deeming the application complete doesn't necessarily mean that the design has been resolved fully. It only means that they've submitted the minimum required material for the application that's listed on the application itself. So oftentimes, and almost all the time, let's say an elevation is submitted. That's a requirement. If they don't submit an elevation, it's an incomplete. But if they submitted that elevation, using it as an example, continues to be refined as staff works with the applicant, the urban designer works with the applicant, and then ultimately the design review subcommittee.
Okay, so that process happens after it's deemed complete, typically.
Yes.
It sounds like it, yeah, okay.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any public comments?
Chair, we do. We have one in chambers. Ellen? Ellen, and you have 3 minutes. Please state your name and city of residence.
My name is Ellen Evans, and my city of residence is Los Angeles. Good evening, commissioners. I'm here representing the Doheny Sunset Plaza Neighborhood Association. We advocate for the interests of the 2,000 households just to your north. I'm here primarily to express support and gratitude for the new recommendations for noticing and community engagement. We certainly hope that community comment is taken seriously and is not approached performatively. And we think that when the meetings are scheduled, they should be scheduled, obviously, when the feedback will be meaningful, as you pointed out. We believe that a truly collaborative approach and inclusive approach will result in better projects, and we certainly want to see projects we love on our southern border. Thanks again, and we appreciate your rigorous engagement with the specifics of this plan.
Thank you, Ellen. And Chair, that is our last public speaker for this item.
Okay, thank you. Then I will close the public comment portion of this hearing, and we may now begin deliberation, which may also include questions for staff if we feel the need to. Would anyone like to go first?
I'll go.
Commissioner Hoopengarner.
I mean, I'm definitely inclined to support this. I mean, the 1,000 feet has been something we've been wanting for a very long time, and you know, council has wanted it. I mean, this came through council quite some time ago. That's all great, but the neighborhood meeting component. I mean, first of all, the cost of noticing, I'm just going to give a hard pass on that. These are projects that are going to make tens of millions of dollars, and a couple $1,000s in noticing is a spit in the bucket. It is nothing. So I don't see that as an issue. But the fact of the matter is the way this is written, and I appreciate staff trying to sort of scoop in the existing deemed complete applications, but I think that this needs to be rewritten in a way that achieves the objective the council stated, that to get neighborhood input. I mean, neighborhood input has done a lot to help certain projects. You know, move the driveway from the north to the south. It creates a better turn. It does that. And the neighbors know. They know what's going on. And so that input is really important, and that engagement is also important to the developer. Engage and work with the neighbors so that when it comes time to come to planning, everybody's on board, and, you know, yay, you know, Bob's your uncle, you know. But this business of having it 60 days before a planning commission hearing is tantamount to useless, frankly. It's a waste of time. It's happening after design review. It's 60 days. These people are ready. You're ready to calendar this for approval at the 60-day mark. I mean, what's your timeline when you're actually building the calendar for approvals? You know when things are going to come on the calendar, a month from now, 2 months from now. So 60 days for a meeting for the neighborhood, to me, it's kind of insulting to the neighbors. Yay, come out, and we're going to show you something that you're not going to be able to change, and you're not actually going to be able to do anything. We're just going to go, see here, we've now had our meeting, here's our thing, and now go home. So I'm interested to hear what my colleagues think, but I really feel that that's a waste of everyone's time and money, and does not in any way achieve the objective. And I think there's a way to write it to scoop in the existing deemed complete projects, to maybe gain some benefit from neighborhood meetings, but it kind of really defeats the purpose for all future projects. That's my 20 cents.
Okay. Commissioner Carvalero?
Yeah, I feel similarly, and that's why I was asking all the questions about the deemed complete, because I'm trying to understand what level of design resolution those projects are when it is deemed complete. And 60 days before Planning Commission, any comments that are voiced at that point, unless they're minor, the design team won't be able to pick them up in time to make the posting and have everything presented and staff report written. So I feel like the sequence needs to be defined. Maybe it's 60 days before design review. Maybe that becomes the benchmark once it's deemed complete, instead of 60 days before it comes to Planning Commission. At least that gives the community enough time to respond, gives the design team time to respond before they hit design review, because they're in the design process. And that just seems a lot more effective.
Agreed.
Commissioner Matos?
Thank you, Chair. So very supportive of this item. I think that any opportunity to notify the public in a meaningful way, an expanded way, is good. And I think that's part of our city's values, and it's something that we've always done. And I think that this is something that we've seen many projects come before this body, and people say, oh, we didn't even know there was a meeting, or, oh, you know, we live 504 feet away, we didn't get the notice, you know? So I think that this is great, very supportive of the item. I do also concur with my colleagues' concerns about the sequence of the 60-day notice as it relates to the planning, 60 days before planning versus 60 days before design review. I'll end my comments with just a quick question to staff, if that's okay. Is that an explicit council directive, or is there anything that we can do tonight to address that concern with the sequence for the 60 days?
Regarding the neighborhood meeting?
Yeah, the issue that Commissioner Carviero and Hoop and Gardner have brought up. Is there a way that...
No, they weren't super explicit about, you know, when it should happen, if it's before the, you know, before the Planning Commission or before the Design Review Steering Committee. But let me just double check.
I didn't see anything in the item for council.
Yeah, so that would allow us to make a propose a change tonight.
It doesn't matter. I mean, council gave general direction, but our job is to look at the thing and flesh it out and do it right, and bring it back to council fully thought through. And I think the discussion we're having here is not quite.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, the question would be: are we able to make it a discretionary change, or does this have to be proposed as a recommendation to council?
No, we can definitely make changes to the text amendment.
Okay.
As long as we stay within the boundaries of the direction. I think that's okay.
Of the council. That's what I was.
Yeah, and I'm already looking at some verbiage that might be able to help. So as you continue with your deliberation, I'll
that sounds good. Yeah, I'm curious to see where we land. I love the idea of us just thinking about what we feel like makes sense today, and then we could maybe check with staff and legal, depending on how substantial that is. We should probably take just a minute to make sure we're not deviating substantially from the original intent.
Yeah, just to conclude my comments just really quickly, Chair, sorry. So I would support that change. The other thing I just want to say is, for whatever it's worth, this might have to be a different time discussion, but if we're going to have 1,000 foot noticing requirements for development agreements, I think that it should be across the board. I mean, I think it should apply to specific plan amendments. I think it should apply to everything. I think having, 1,000 foot noticing on one type of project and then only 500 on others, personally, I don't agree with that. I think it should be a very succinct process that everyone knows and they don't have to differentiate, but that's just my opinion. And that concludes my comments.
Well, I wouldn't disagree in the sense that there are large projects that in my opinion, warrant large noticing, that aren't subject to DAs, but that's sort of not what this is. I mean, been some, and there will be some let's talk about the Melrose Triangle. You know, that is a huge project, well, the Melrose Lake, if you will. It's a huge project that warranted 1,000-foot noticing, which of course didn't happen at the time. So I think it's a good conversation to have. It's unfortunately not where council went with this directive being strictly related to DAs,
Yeah.
but I would agree that specific plans and all things mega, and we should define mega, should warrant 1,000 square foot notice.
And Commissioner Hoopengartner, just to step in, I think it's a really good point you just raised. I think part of staff's intent here was to tie it to the DA and the fact that the Planning Commission really is the first body, and that's the first public hearing that really considers the DA. So I do think, you know, one option for the commission, if so inclined, is, you know, the 1,000-foot notice and the specifics regarding 60 days before the Planning Commission hearing, because it's tied to DAs, and then of course, the commission has the option to send up recommendations for the council to enlarge the scope of what they may want to do relative to, as you mentioned, a specific plan, or even if there are classes of projects potentially separate and apart from the DA.
Over 50,000 square feet, or, you know, I don't know what the number is, but there is a size at which point, gee, we should really have proper noticing.
So we're able to specify 60 days before design review,
So we could change
or make a recommendation.
E1 to say the neighborhood meeting should be held not less than 60 days before the design review meeting of the Planning Commission.
I agree, that makes sense. I also see Commissioner Solomon's been patiently waiting, so not to cut either of you two off, is now a good time to?
No,
okay.
please.
Commissioner Solomon.
Sorry, I don't want to jump in like I might otherwise on the dais, because I don't know like how loud or booming my Wizard of Oz presence is in the room right now. So I appreciate it. I agree with the intent of this. I think that neighborhood transparency is very important. And I do agree with the sort of streamlining across the board that if it's going to be 1,000 for this, it should be 1,000 for that. To me, that kind of simplifies the job. But a greater concern, I guess, that I have is that I don't know what our role on the Planning Commission is as it relates to development agreements. And I know that we have a joint session upcoming with the City Council to hopefully get a greater resolution on that. But as these have come before us, and as we've had reminders from staff about we may be veering too far into it, I do think that this question has been raised by other commissioners as well. I think it's kind of cloudy about what our role is. And I think that right now, this is kind of contemplating that we can weigh in and step in heavily on DAs. Otherwise, why would you notice everyone before a planning commission meeting on something with a DA? However, if the outcome of that meeting in a month from now, in February, the joint meeting is that DAs are for council only, I would want to reevaluate this notice requirement if our purview changes as a result of that. I wouldn't want to get the public spun up on protesting a DA at a planning commission meeting if that is suddenly not in our purview. And then finally, so if there's interest in revisiting this, I would support that. But finally, I would also just say what I alluded to in my questions is that I don't support applying this to deemed complete applications. I think that we're a little muddy right now as it relates to where we want to go with it. And I think that kind of changing the rules midstream, even though they may not be design standard rules, they are real rules that the project is adhering to as they go forward with the public process on their project. And if someone applied with one set of rules and it's changed thereafter, after they have a deemed complete application, I think it's a bad precedent to set. So one, I'd be interested in pushing this off until after our joint meeting. And two, I would be interested in removing the applicability towards deemed complete applications. That concludes my remarks. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
I'd just like to mention that this really doesn't have anything to do with what the Planning Commission's role in a development agreement is. This is about noticing neighbors about large projects that will involve a development agreement. And that neighborhood meeting, by the way, will probably have exactly zero conversation around the development agreement itself, because that won't even exist yet. That neighborhood meeting will be entirely about the design. So I think the point of this is to capture back to, in air quotes, large projects, and a development agreement was a way to categorize large projects. So I don't think that any of this conversation has anything to do with the Commission's purview around development agreements. This is entirely about public involvement in large projects, et cetera. So I wouldn't be inclined to push this away, because I think that noticing is important. But I think Commissioner Solomon's brought up an interesting point about the whole deemed complete. And maybe the distinction can and should be made between projects that are deemed complete that have not gone through design review and those that have. And if they've already gone through design review, a neighborhood meeting at that point would be redundant and useless. And so I think by separating the deemed complete applications into already been through design review, AKA SASE, and those that aren't, would perhaps be the better way to approach this.
I think that's a good idea, Commissioner Hoopengarner.
Okay.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree too. I have some thoughts, but Vice Chair, did you have anything you wanted to?
You know what? I think I agree with the direction we're moving. So I'm interested in hearing any proposed language from staff to effectuate the concerns raised by the Commission.
Okay, great. I likewise feel the same, that I think we're all talking about the same thing and have similar concerns, so I will not repeat in that regard.
But Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt. I think we have been talking too about the direction it's moving. I think we do have some concerns on our end about changing it to design review.
Let me get my thoughts out then first, and then I understand that you may have an opinion too, so obviously we want to. I think, I don't know, I guess I'm looking at this from process that I've seen on projects that I work on. So as far as the idea that some projects may be in some point of process, and this may be a little bit of a curveball, I agree that that's unusual, and in particular if a project's deemed complete, but I have two projects right now in a city that had a retroactive code that has created exactly that nebulous zone where now the project has to do dark sky studies and other things or not be code compliant, even though it's gone through all the process and is basically a plan check. And so it's not unheard of, but I don't think it's preferred to cause that sort of twist. It sounds like city has some opinions on what to do with regards to how we handle a neighborhood meeting for projects that maybe have already gone through design review or the 60-day number. I do agree, though, in principle that it would make sense for a neighborhood meeting to occur before a design review meeting, because that way there's ample time for that feedback to go into the project, and there's also time for those on subcommittees of this planning commission to understand the context of those neighborhood meetings and not create a strange or atypical process when it goes to the planning commission. And the other thing I wanted to note is I understand that you're working on a design review handbook. So just to go back to, and this is maybe more of a guideline type thing, but if a project goes through a substantial redesign with a development agreement, it'd be good to see if there's a way to try to avoid scenarios where it then appears in a totally different form to the planning commission after design review. If neighborhood feedback is something we're looking for, I would extend to that if there's a neighborhood meeting and then a design review meeting and then a totally different design appears, that a design review meeting would be a chance for more community input again. And there have been a couple of instances where we're just looking at a totally different design one day, and that everyone's seeing it as the staff reports come out, including the neighbors. So maybe that can be addressed in this design review handbook. Maybe that's less about the zone text. With regards to what we're deciding today, I agree that it's typical for us to review and make recommendations to City Council on zone text. So I think I'm comfortable with us doing what we want to do, provided that staff feels we're in alignment and has no concerns. And they seem very eager to say something, so I'm gonna stop now.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, thank you for just letting me interject here for a moment. I did want to bring up a wrinkle, which is that the Design Review Subcommittee is a standing committee that was directed to be created by the council, but it's not referenced in the code as far as our process that these projects move through. The Planning Commission holding a public hearing, that's a step in the process. So to introduce this requirement with reference to something that's not in the code, I think is a potential problem, because then the code is referencing something that's not part of the process in the code. It's obviously part of our process as directed by council for these projects to go through design review subcommittee, but the subcommittee is not codified as part of the project review process.
Okay, I have a question.
Sorry. Could it be codified in the course of doing this text amendment? Could we add, a new item to the definitions section of the code that says this is what the design review committee is? Or
Commissioner, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I think it would be a bit outside of how we notice the zone text amendment. I do think in the scope of what the commission's talking about and the concerns with design review, and to a point Chair Lombardi raised about sort of the design review handbook coming back, I do think there's an opportunity for commission to potentially make some recommendations to council, but our ZTA and the intent of the city's capture of the council's directive was specific to public notice and increased community input relative to projects with development agreements. And to the point from our CDD director, those projects that require development agreements under our code in Chapter 1966, the first public hearing required that's codified is the Planning Commission hearing. So I do think, to the point you raised, it's certainly something that could be explored by council in terms of the possibility of codifying something within the code. But I think my concern would be its inclusion in a notice ZTA that's specific to the public notice and increased community input for projects that are tied to the development agreement entitlement.
Well, I guess the question is, how do we achieve what council's asking for the neighborhood meetings?
Well, I think just, if I may, Commissioner Hoopengardner and Chair Lombardi, so this actually makes sense because I've heard that the body process has to be laid out in government code in order for it to be valid. I've heard that with other things, so that makes sense. But is there, I guess, absent an opportunity to tie it to the design review, our options, like, is there an option for us to tie, like, for example, if it's not 60 days before the Planning Commission meeting, to instead say it's 120 days or it's 180 days before the Planning Commission meeting?
I was headed there myself, but that really becomes obstructive, if it doesn't need to be. Yeah. And so maybe the appropriate time is, X many days after the application is filed. Because then that's a trigger, and within 90 days of the filing of the application, they've got something in their brains. That's when the time to have the neighborhood meeting is when they're thinking through the new project. That's the real sweet spot for a neighborhood meeting. So I think if we tie it to the actual filing of the application, maybe that's the
I
opportunity.
think we have something from staff, right?
Yeah, and for example, for development agreements, we do require that the neighborhood meeting be held no more than 60 days after the application date. So we're tying it to the actual application date, which is fairly early in the process, right? So we could insert that in, as a substitute to that section E1. And it's tied to the application date. So as soon as you apply, within 60 days, you'll have that neighborhood meeting. Now, that will capture all new applications, right? So
So that addresses Commissioner Solomon's concern about it, applying to projects that have already been, so deep in the pipeline. Would that address that as well?
That would not capture those projects that are currently in the pipeline.
Okay.
But it would skip those that haven't gone to design review yet.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah,
chunk
no,
that's missing.
I'm there. So we're able to do it that way then, through the application date, 60 days after application date?
Yes, I think that we would prefer from the staff perspective tying it to something that is already in the code as a required step. So the application date, I think, would be preferable to us to the date of the design review subcommittee meeting, which is not specifically called out in the code.
That makes sense to me.
I do have a question to go back to the design review for a minute. I realize that that's not mentioned in the code, but what is driving when a design review meeting, there's a process there, of course, even if it's not in the code because it's happening. So can that handbook or something not say that there must be a neighborhood meeting before it goes to design review? And that's probably
Well, the problem is it's a handbook and it's not
I know, yeah.
a code requirement,
Yeah, I'm just trying to,
I mean, it's a great goal, but we all
Avoid
know
that.
how a lot of things slide through the cracks, and if there's no,
I do feel like if it was tied to deeming the application or the application being submitted, that is a better measure to, something that's easy to attach, and it would make sense that then the neighborhood meeting would happen quickly, and then design review would happen thereafter. There'd probably be a very unusual case of a very fast project that they may try to jam it through all at once. But I know Commissioner Solomon, your hand's raised, so one moment. I guess I'm wondering, then we just have to address the projects that are already out there.
right, the ones that haven't gone to design review.
Commissioner Solomon, did you want to comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say it's a question for staff. It seems like a lot of this conversation kind of hinges upon design review, which I agree there is. It makes a lot of sense to have a neighborhood meeting before it's a design review meeting. However, we can't tie it to a design review meeting because that is not codified. Design review is not codified. So my question is, what would it take to codify design review?
It would, I think, need to go to City Council first for consideration, and then come back to Planning Commission for codification. So I think that's part of the challenge about trying to get certain notice requirements moved forward to the council to meet their directive, and then why sometimes the ZTAs are sent up with specific considerations for the council, like codifying a more express design review component within our code.
Okay, so absent, I guess it seems like there's starting to be a swelling consensus for tying it to the date of an application. However, I think the original intent that people are speaking about tonight is good, that we want it to be tied somehow to design review. Can we do something along the lines of what we've done with past CTAs, where we would send it up, in this case, tied to the application date. The neighborhood meeting must happen within X number of days after application, and then also give a recommendation in that ZTA saying, by the way, council, we need direction on codifying design review.
Yes, Commissioner. We've done that before, where we take sort of additional recommendations from the commission, and we inserted into the a write-up for the planning commission and recommendations from the commission. So we have captured that before.
I'm not there on the dais to get like a general sort of vibes feeling from everyone, but to me that kind of makes sense. We do need the design review aspect of this codified. However, it sounds like we've come up with a sort of workaround solution for tonight. So that's where my head is.
And I'm sorry to interrupt deliberations. I did have one additional point I wanted to raise for the commission's consideration, just that 60 days after the application submitted, it may be still pretty preliminary depending on how complex the application is. So I just wanted to throw that out for council's consideration in terms of when you're thinking of sort of the deal points of a development agreement.
Is there a recommendation for a longer period from staff?
I personally was immediately thinking about 90 days as a minimum. I think you need some time to flesh things out and, you know, to actually have a conversation. You don't want to show up at a neighborhood meeting going, well, we're thinking about doing something, and then...
It also gives them a deadline.
Yeah.
For the design team to...
Right, it gets them moving.
Get a hustle,
and
yeah.
says, okay, you got to have something in order to talk to the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So...
Maybe something like within 90 days, within 120 days, someone could schedule the neighborhood meeting much sooner. They could do it right after their application, but it gives them time to flesh out, but also a deadline.
My concern about pushing it too far is then it starts potentially overlapping design review, et cetera, and I think it defeats, again, the purpose. The purpose is an early conversation. So I think 60 is a little short, but I think 90 is fine. I don't know what everybody else thinks.
I'd be curious to get the thoughts of our community development director.
Thank you. My thoughts are that 60 would be consistent with our other entitlement processes that require this. So for purposes of kind of having the same thing that, one process, I think to your point earlier about aligning the node, the radius, aligning the time frame is something people can understand, it's easier to understand and monitor for people who may not be as plugged into this day in and day out. That being said, the commission could certainly, if they felt like this type of application was, different enough that it required a longer time frame before the meeting, I think that would be fine too. I do worry about having too many, introducing lots of different types of processes can make it more complex for the public to follow.
And I'm fine with keeping the 60 days, but here's maybe the question is when, and let's just put this on average in air quotes, people come to you with an application. What, especially ones complex enough and big enough to involve a development agreement. On average, when they file their application, what percent complete would you say they are in their thinking, their design, their process? Because I think that informs the 60 days. If on average they show up and go, hey, we're thinking about doing something, and they file an application, or are they actually filing something with, hey, we've already hired our architect and we've already got A, B, C, and D in place?
I'll let Antonio speak specifically to the applications that we've had recent experience with where development agreements are proposed and a project might not otherwise have required a neighborhood meeting. I will say that is a specific kind of subset, and we have one in mind right now that we're thinking about, a project type that would require a development agreement but not otherwise trigger a project. But to apply these to development agreements specifically, right, there could be a variety of different types of projects that could come forward with that entitlement. So I just want to make sure that that's something the Commission's also thinking about. But with respect to the types of projects we've recently had filed with the city, specifically billboard projects that have not otherwise required a neighborhood meeting, I'll let Antonio speak to that.
Okay, while Antonio's coming over, I would just say as someone that works on the design side, I would say that any project I've worked on has had some form of renderings and plans before they're submitting something, at least if it's a project on the scale of a development agreement. I know there are instances where there's an idea to get something in the door for any number of reasons, but even then, it's, I mean, maybe Rogeria, you can comment on that too, but there's usually some renderings and something to react to at that point.
I mean, the packages that we've received in Planning Commission are for the most part schematic. You know, the plans are sort of sorted, you know, there are renders, there are elevations, like all the facts the facts are starting to show up in the package. So 60 days or 90 days after the application, and if they're already at a schematic level, that gives them enough time to, you know, put a presentation together, I think, for the neighborhood.
Yeah, I might add the 60 days, at least in my experience, has been that it's quite early in the process, and oftentimes not a project that requires a development agreement is in almost all cases a more complex project, and 60 days is really early to even flesh out what they're intending to provide for the project. These development agreements require a public benefit component, and so there's a lot of back and forth going on, and so there's a design, but then public benefits and a variety of other logistics that takes place. So I would say 60 days is quite early in the process.
What would you recommend?
Is that not a good, sorry to interject, but is that not good then that the negotiations on a development agreement haven't started because the neighborhood feedback is coming in before that you've gone that far?
Mm-hmm.
There's that foresight.
I just want to throw out there, I am very supportive of this item again, but at a certain point, my question would be for this body as a group, is it more appropriate as a motion to table and then have staff bring back something that is a little bit more thought out and less on the spot of us trying to figure out, you know, codifying a body or you know, what's the appropriate number of days after an application has been submitted. I think that this conversation is great. I love it, and I'm supportive of the item again. Just want to say that again. But, you know, I think at a certain point we should consider that for a more thought-out process.
Yeah, I kind of concur that, you know, sometimes it's good to let everyone process for a minute, but maybe staff has an opinion. I also know Commissioner Solomon wants to speak.
Thanks. I'll be quick. I was one. I agree. Probably tabling is where I would lean, but I was going to suggest compromise language of within neighborhood meeting within 60 days of application, with the opportunity for any extensions to be granted at the discretion of the community development director. That's if we're looking for a cut through tonight, but I think most all of us don't deal with project entitlements from the ground level. I know a few of you do. So I really don't know what the timeline is. I don't know if it's 60, I don't know if it's 90, I don't know. Staff has a much better idea of that. So I'd be interested in giving them a little bit more time to think through it.
I would prefer for us to move this forward simply because it's an important thing. The 1,000 square feet is an important thing to get codified and get going forward. I think the neighborhood meeting piece is relatively minor in some respects compared to the 1,000 square feet and noticing. But I think that if we can do it within, I like Commissioner Solomon's suggestion that it's within 60 days of the application date with appropriate extensions of, you know, at the discretion of the director. And I don't know if we want to limit that or, you know, up to, you know, a total of 120 days or something. I don't know. But I would be very comfortable with leaving that up to the director, you know, setting a goal of 60 days and then leaving it up to the director to say, you know, this project is extra mega and therefore, you know, give them an extra 60 days. I would be comfortable with that.
I agree with that too. And there is some opportunity for staff to continue to adjust and city council to weigh in, although I do like the idea of us having as baked as we can before it goes forward. But that all makes sense to me. And I would just reiterate that I know that there's a lot of development agreements and things that go into place, but again, I don't know if that's necessarily a requirement that all be vetted out. And in fact, there might be some great insight from a community meeting before that gets too far.
Well, and I think when you're talking about the public benefits and a lot of that stuff that's in the development agreement, to me, that's not what I read as council's goal, is that the public meeting is going to discuss a lot of the public benefits in the development agreement. The public meeting is about the project. And this development agreement was a way of capturing size and importance of a project. And it doesn't really have anything to do, that neighborhood meeting doesn't really have anything to do with the development agreement itself. It's just a way to create a category. And back to our conversation about adding specific plans and projects over X size, that's really what the DA is about, if I'm reading it.
I think you've stated what I've thought in a different lens, and it makes sense to me too. Yeah.
I'm in agreement.
So I think that we can achieve what the goal is here with some minor modifications to E1, you know, that it relates to the application date, it's the same 60 days with discretion for the director.
I just have a quick question for the director, because I'm not opposed to it. Again, all for moving this forward if it makes sense. But if there is a 60-day requirement and you are given the discretion to extend that, is there any type of administrative burden concerns, especially in the event that you're exercising that authority often? Like, does that make sense? Is doing it that way feasible, is what I'm trying to ask.
I think it's feasible. Again, I think that the reason that the staff recommendation is before you, it was contemplated again with projects that have already been filed, and so we were looking at later in the process, understanding where the commission's deliberation has been. It's about trying to get this to be earlier in the process, so we want to help you be able to achieve that. There may be different types of projects, as I was kind of mentioning earlier. There could be lots of different types of projects that have development agreements. I'm thinking of a development agreement that the commission reviewed last year, which was just to extend the time frame for entitlements, which was for the Arts Club project. So that project was previously approved. It came back with a development agreement. So that was an application that was filed. That wouldn't have, you know, all of these other associated elements necessarily, because it wasn't a new project going to design review. It was a DA to extend the time frame, right? So I'm just throwing that out there as another example. Development agreements could come in many different ways. So I think having some flexibility in there would help account for the wide range of projects that could come with a development agreement. I don't think it would create an administrative burden for us to be able to allow for extensions of time beyond the initial 60-day period.
Okay, I just wanted to thank you for saying that. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't creating another administrative bureaucratic hurdle by doing that. So thank you for the answer.
But actually, Nick, you brought up a really good point about the Arts Club DA extension, and how would that fall into this language? Is that a new application for the extension? So it would have a noticing requirement, or how would that work?
Obviously, I'd have to look more closely at the details of it, but I believe in concept, yes, if it was a development agreement application and that was what was being requested, then it would be subject to the noticing requirements associated with that application type. So what would be noticed would be the request for the development agreement, the associated aspects of the application, which at that time were to extend the life of entitlements of an already approved project.
Right, but there were some, if I recall correctly, there were some amendments as well.
I'd have to go back and refresh my memory, but yeah, I bring that up as
the amendments that would require the noticing that hey, neighborhood, things are changing if we approve this.
Yeah, I simply brought that up as an example of different types of ways that development agreements might manifest themselves and come through this process.
That's a good example, thank you.
I have a quick question. I'm out of curiosity here. do we have any thoughts on within 60 days of a deemed complete? The application's deemed complete?
Well, to Antonio's point, there's stuff that's gone through design review that's not deemed complete. And our goal is to have the neighborhood meeting before design review. So if we wait till deemed complete,
It could be
we
after.
potentially be having our neighborhood meeting after design review, which defeats the purpose.
Okay. Did you have that?
So,
okay. Thank you, Commissioner Caballero.
You know, I'm just thinking about one thing too. I perhaps in the realities of what's out there right now, there's probably an interest to capture more community feedback on the billboard projects. And that's, you know, I feel like we're headed in the right direction, but it might leave those as, you know, past, or maybe there's some way that it can, I guess if, for instance, 60 days or at a different date at the discretion of the community development director, there's a neighborhood meeting, maybe that somehow allows some language to also catch those projects that I think we're trying to be caught.
I just have a quick question. I understand where we're at, and I understand Commissioner Hoopengartner, and I agree with you that, you know, we want to see this move forward, right? Is there any ability of, if we did decide to table this, for it to be more thought out, for it to come back to a more immediate planning commission meeting, or is this something that you guys feel like you would need to wait multiple meetings and multiple agendas to bring back? Because while recognizing the concern of Commissioner Hoopengartner and also recognizing that we're all doing this on the fly and staff is trying to put something together right now out of complete thin air, is there an ability to respect the concerns that have been voiced about timing and the ability to move this forward, but also create a product that is well thought out for consideration?
Yes, and I would maybe call Mr. Castillo back up just in terms of looking at the upcoming meeting agendas. But if that's the will of the commission, I think the CDD and acting planning manager could look at what's ahead. And of course, the commission could continue it to a date certain and staff could come back with several options. That is an option.
If there's the ability to get this at an immediate future agenda, respecting the concerns of my colleague, and also I'm in favor and I recognize that this is needed. If we have the ability to continue to a date certain and it's a more immediate meeting and not 3 months from now, I think that we should consider that, and I would strongly support that.
Yeah, I guess let's hear from staff, and then we can.
So we're reviewing the advanced calendar right now, and just we'll be able to provide some insights there momentarily.
Well, I guess, and I, you know, as long as it's an immediately near future, but I don't think this is this difficult.
Well, I think that we've given them a lot of things to consider and a lot of good material. I've loved this discussion. It's one of my favorite things about being on the Planning Commission is having robust policy discussions. But I think that now that we've given them a whole myriad of feedback, they could go back and actually build something that is airtight and that has something that we can react to in a more thoughtful way, and actually give it to the public as well, so that they can consider it in advance. I mean, again, if we continue it to date certain, it could be a week, 2 weeks, you know. Do we have any update on the calendar?
Yeah, so Commissioner, March 6th seems to be the sort of next agenda that works with regards to the amount of work that needs to do to prepare the actual report, the analysis, the report, and then all of the required noticing that we have to do in order to put the packet together. And it's also a little bit lighter than our upcoming February meeting agendas.
Is there any thought here on that? I mean, I guess I would also just ask to staff, I mean, what are your thoughts based on where we're headed right now? Are you understanding the message and feeling like it's workable, or are you feeling like there's more discussion that may need to happen to make sure it is airtight, as Commissioner Matos just stated.
I'll let Francisco weigh in as well. I think that if the commission wants to recommend something that mirrors or closely matches other processes we use for neighborhood meetings, that seems something we already do. So we have a way of, that's plugging into a type of process we're familiar with. I don't think that raises concerns. Obviously, there's the question of the projects that have already been filed some time ago. Leave it to the commission as to how you would like to consider that with respect to this amendment. I don't know that we have a solution at hand for that, other than that those wouldn't be covered if it was from at the moment, it seems, unless I missed that part.
Could we just add something that says for projects having, been complete as of the, prior to the effective date of this code, then there shall be a neighborhood meeting not less than 60 days prior, the part that's already in there. Put that, basically leave that in there.
It should be within 60 days of the enactment of whatever we enact. If something's already in the pipeline, it should be, within 60 days of the approval of this ZTA.
That might be 20 projects, though, if I understand correctly.
Well, there's 20 projects, but the question is, how many of those have already gone through design review? Okay, so the question is, is it 10 projects? And especially if we push this off another 6 weeks, then it has to take another month to go to council, and then we're talking, all of a sudden we're at 6 months before this ever goes into effect.
Well, we already, it sounds like we're in a somewhat agreement here. Yeah. We're okay with the 1,000-foot radius,
right.
No issue. We have suggested a 60-day after application for a neighborhood council meeting with the director's discretion to extend that if it's a large project or whatever the condition may be.
That's it. And
yeah.
Isaac has crafted language while we sit here much more complex than that.
Yeah.
So
and also, we would want to exclude projects that have been deemed complete that have gone through design review.
Well, that's the trick.
Brought up in deemed complete.
If we change E1 to state the neighborhood meeting shall be held not less than 60 days after filing an application,
yep.
Subject to the director's discretion for extensions, okay? That part we've got.
Yep.
The part is scooping in the ones that haven't gone through design review, and how do you define them? And how do you add another?
Yeah, my comment was, can't we just kind of leave what's there and say for projects that, we're already in the process, and then blah, 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 60 days before the planning commission meeting? Because that was the original intent, I think, of that 60-day, if I'm understanding correctly. Does that make sense?
But again, if they haven't gone through design review yet, that's the
well,
whole
and
point.
And having not, yeah, as part of it.
But the problem is, they don't want to use design review in the language because it doesn't exist, again, in air quotes.
I forgot about that.
So
yes. Okay.
That's the tricky bit, is how do we define that group that hasn't gone to design review yet?
I think that's the part that does, to Commissioner Matos' point, feel a little bit like trying to figure it out on the fly. That part I don't feel like we have a solution crafted with language that, that would meet that at the moment. So I would feel better taking some time, if that's the goal, if that's the commission's goal, taking some time to figure out what that language looks like. If it's just simply moving it to the application date, that's I think cleaner and simpler, and we would be comfortable with that.
Okay, and Vice Chair Gregoire would like to say something, and also then Commissioner Solomon next.
Yeah, I just want to jump in. I appreciate the desire to move this quickly. I don't see this as being so urgent that we can't continue this to the March 6th meeting to give staff additional time to revise their recommendation to us tonight in accordance with the feedback we have given. I'm more than happy to go forward with the creative ideas put forth by everybody here, including Commissioner Hubergarner and Commissioner Solomon and others. But I think I'm hearing from staff that maybe we need a little more time to do some further consideration. So, you know, if I would be happy, you know, if my fellow commissioners are okay with just continuing this to March 6th, that's what I would support.
Are you making a motion?
I would
Commissioner
move
Solomon,
that.
can we get his comments really quick? And then if we want to make a motion.
Ditto to Vice Chair Gregoire.
Okay.
I raised my hand to make a motion.
Okay.
I will second the motion.
So since, just from a process standpoint, why don't we let Vice Chair Gregoire state the motion, and then if anyone wants to second or request a modification to his motion.
I guess my motion would be to continue this matter until March 6th in order to give staff additional time to further refine its recommendation to this body.
I will second the motion.
And just a note for the record, so with the pending motion on the floor to continue it to a date certain, that does not require re-noticing of the zone text amendment.
Okay. Commissioner
Correct.
Solomon, you were also about to make a motion. Any?
That was my one chance to make a motion. I've never been the first on the motion since joining.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's Vice Chair Gregoire that's the apology, but I'll deal with it.
Okay. Sorry about that.
While you're, revising, I would just like to throw out there that one thing that hasn't been included in this language is the language around construction noticing. And right now, the construction noticing is 100 feet. And that's just pretty useless. And the question is, should we, if we're going to be talking about neighborhood meetings and noticing, should the construction noticing be moved to 500 feet instead of 100 feet? Because we're talking about the impacts to the neighborhood and letting people know what's going on. I don't know what my colleagues' thoughts are. Now that might throw a wrinkle, and Isaac's going to say, we can't continue and include that because that wasn't in the original thing. But I just want to throw that out there for staff.
Well, one note, Commissioner Hoopengartner, and I think we could ask you to repeat it for the record, but I think one thing the commission could do with the pending motion to continue this item to a date certain for March 6th relative to the notice associated with the DA projects would also include the recommendation tonight that goes up to council at a future meeting that essentially asks their input and a potential, lets them know that the Planning Commission is interested in specific construction noticing requirements, since it's a little separate from the directive they provided on this item.
Yeah, and what we can do in that follow-up staff report, we can include a section of like additional planning commissioner recommendations. So we'll be sure that we capture those, and that will be the actual staff report that gets forwarded on to the city council.
If I may, before the commission votes on the motion that I think is on the table, just to have clarity for staff about what the commission would like to see with respect to projects that have already submitted applications. Are you looking for options on how to capture those in terms of having prospective neighborhood meetings prior to coming to this body? Just would like to make sure we're being responsive to what the commission's looking for.
Commissioner
It's obviously a
Matos.
policy decision.
Thank you, Chair. My opinion, I welcome everyone's opinion, is I think if a public meeting would be a moot point, if the project is so far along that additional public meeting would be a moot point, I don't see the point in having a public meeting for something that's already moved, it's 2 seconds from being considered.
If it's already gone through design review, there's just no point in a neighborhood meeting. But we want to capture those that haven't gone to design review.
Yes.
So that 50% or whatever percentage of those 20 projects, that's what we want to capture.
That have not gone to design
That have
review.
not gone to design review. And this is where Isaac comes in, and whether or not this new thing that you're going to do is going to actually throw in a new definition of design review, subcommittee, and all of that. But
think
That's the goal. Now,
Yeah.
how you do that.
I think that's what we need some time to figure out. If that's
Yep.
the consensus of the commission, what you're looking for from staff. We're happy to do that analysis. I think we'll need to look at what those projects are, where they are, which ones are in those various stages, and try to craft some language that would fulfill that intent.
Yeah.
I would throw out there that perhaps even just allowing for discretion of the community development director may be enough to edit out if it's very clear what our intent is and what the desire is, and then, that would maybe allow the removal of something that seems onerous or too late and not necessary.
That's helpful.
Without having
we're happy to look at that. Yeah.
And I mean, I think as long as you all are usually great at getting everything to us and buttoned up, and I think if we're really clear about the intent, then that's just what we would see.
We don't want to have neighborhood meetings just to, tick a box.
Yeah, that's
We
what
want
I'm
to have a neighborhood meeting to have a meeting, to really have a conversation. I mean, I've been on neighborhood meetings and, the people running it, and frankly, a couple times the staff says, well, this was on schedule from 6 to 7, so at 7 we're done. No, the idea is the neighborhood meeting goes as long as it needs to go to discuss what everybody has to discuss. And so that's, the intent of this.
Commissioner Solomon over there, I see your hand up again.
Thanks. I know there's a motion pending, so just if we're talking about things staff could possibly consider and maybe bring to us if and when this item comes back. I saw absent from our staff report and then also from the staff report to the council. I'd just be curious what other neighboring jurisdictions and other comparable small cities do. Like Santa Monica, Beverly Hills, Culver City, LA.
Happy to look into that and bring that information to you when if the item comes back, if the commission gives direction for the item to come back.
And, I think Commissioner Solomon's suggestion about broadcasting design review is really excellent and something I've wished for a very long time, and would in many respects create more of a neighborhood meeting that people don't have to go there. They could zoom in and they could comment, and that would be really achieving some of this goal of council's whatever initiative.
And ironically, we had a version of that at one point during the pandemic. And
it was great during the pandemic. We had all kinds of people showing up to design review, whereas in the past, design review was, the applicant and 2 people, So broadcasting it and having it on Zoom would be a huge benefit to the community, I think, and to the process. Design review, we've had some great design review meetings that really flesh out design and create some opportunities to improve projects, which is the goal.
Yeah. So it seems like we're all in consensus, and there's a motion and a second. Motion seemed pretty clear to me. Is it clear to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure. I'd just reiterate for the record that the pending motion is to continue the item to a date certain of March 6 for the zone text amendment, with the direction provided to staff this evening, including how to handle existing applications, what other jurisdictions do, and possible recommendations to council on construction noticing, among other items discussed from the dais.
Great.
Sounds good.
Okay, and just a confirmation from our second as well, Andrew?
No, it was actually Commissioner Matos.
Yeah, it was
Oh.
ultimate. Sorry.
I wish it was me, but
My apologies. Commissioner Matos, that all sounds correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Let's go. Can do a roll call vote.
Roll call. Thank you. Commissioner Matos.
Yes.
Commissioner Solomon.
yes.
Commissioner Huppengarner.
Aye.
Commissioner Carvalero.
Yes.
Vice Chair Gregoire.
Yes.
Chair Lombardi.
Yes.
And the motion passes, noting 6 ayes. Commissioner Jones is absent, and this will be legally continued to March 6, 2025.
Okay, thank you. Item number 11, new business. We have no items. Item 12, unfinished business. We also have no items. Same for item 12, excluded consent calendar. Brings us to item 14, items from staff. 14A, Planning Manager's Update, and 14B, Subcommittee Management. And I think Antonio Castillo's presenting today, or?
That will be me, Chair.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Vice Chair, Commissioner. So just to give you a preview of what's to come on the agenda, and for the community that's tuning in to tonight's meeting. So at the February 6th Planning Commission meeting, there is a public hearing scheduled for 8869 Santa Monica Boulevard. That's for a new nightclub use. And that is next to Fiesta Cantina, what used to be the old Z Pizza location before they relocated in our Rainbow District. So that is the item on February 6th. For February 20th, we have several items, several public hearings. We have a ZTA to consider ministerial housing permits, and that's part of our state housing law implementation. We have another public hearing regarding shared housing. So that's a ZTA that's been in the work for a while. There is also a public hearing for another nightclub at 8945 Santa Monica Boulevard. That's next to Salt and Straw, next to Robertson Boulevard on Santa Monica Boulevard. For that February 20th, there's also another public hearing for 7748 Santa Monica Boulevard. This is the change of use from a very small mixed-use residential property to commercial office. In addition, the last public hearing that we have for that Planning Commission meeting is a small subdivision for 1216 North Flores Street. And lastly, I'll just add the February 24th Planning Commission meeting. This is the joint study session with the City Council, where we are going to be discussing Planning Commission DAs and the public benefits policy. So that will all happen on the 24th and potentially could inform some of the discussion when we bring back the noticing item for the March 6th meeting. With regards to design review subcommittee, the January 23rd meeting was canceled, but there is an item for review at the February 13th meeting, which is for 401 North Robertson. That's basically the corner of Robertson and Ashcroft. That's for a mixed-use commercial building. And no other items are scheduled for design review at this time except for that meeting. For long-range planning subcommittee.
I'm sorry, excuse me. That 401 North Robertson, is that a regular design review or is that SASE? Because isn't that a SASE day?
There are no SASE items.
Okay, so that's regular design review.
Regular design review, correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And then for the long-range planning project subcommittee, our next meeting, February 20th, we'll be discussing the zoning improvement program for housing. It's going to be a program overview that is a very comprehensive update to our zoning ordinance in order to facilitate housing production and removing barriers to housing construction and housing affordability in the city. So that'll be sort of an introduction to the long-range planning subcommittee at that time. And with that,
what was the date on this?
That meeting is the February 20th.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. I'll just make a note that I am out of the country on February 13th, which was the 411 North Robertson project, but I understand that perhaps that might be moving or could move, but I did want to just note that for quorum purposes. If it moves to the later date that I heard about, then that would not be a conflict for me. Okay.
Noted. Thank you, Chair.
Anyone else have any attendance items? Okay, then I have one other question just related to the joint session. I'll ask it now. Obviously, we had some topics that came up today that maybe kind of circle around develop agreements and other aspects of it. I'm just curious how open the conversations can be, or how much we must be in line specifically to the original intent, or if it's meant to be a very fluid discussion just for preparation in terms of how we talk about these things. Like, since we have topics like noticing coming up, I mean, is that all in the realm of what the intent is for this joint session? Because the original intent, I believe, was to be really understanding development agreements and the process between the two public bodies. But I'm curious if, where we draw the line, if there's anything with noticing or just breadth of material and duration of time that we all have with what's planned to be discussed.
I would say as of right now, the topic broadly is development agreements and the city's public benefit policy. I think as we get a little closer to the meeting date, we may have more clarity about some of the specifics as we're preparing some materials for that meeting. So I would, if it's all right, propose that we provide an update to you at the next meeting of the Planning Commission when we're getting a little closer to that joint session.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate that.
Certainly.
Okay. Anyone else? No? Okay. Item 15 is public comment. Do we have anyone who
We
wishes
have
to
no
speak?
public comments.
Okay. Item 16, items from commissioners. Would anyone like to speak today?
Yes, I do.
Commissioner Hoopengarner?
First of all, I think we've all are still, frankly, I'm a little bit stunned about what's happened in the past week and the loss, the just unimaginable loss that we've had in this community. And that, from a planning perspective, goes to all of the beautiful architecture and the art and all of just the amazing buildings that we've lost. So for us, I think I'd like us to be taking this opportunity to start thinking very creatively and very proactively about what we do. One of the things I've noticed in some of the flyovers and drone views is that the surprising number of trees that survived the epic destruction. The buildings are gone, but the trees themselves survived, and in spite of the fire. And so I think we're obviously a very dense city, and in some ways, I had neighbors calling and friends calling from all over the country saying, oh my gosh, are you safe? And I was able to say, I'm kind of surrounded by hotels and high-rises, and I'm kind of protected in that respect. But that doesn't protect us from everything. And so I think that this is a real opportunity for all of us to start thinking in a much more complex way and really thinking through how we're doing things and why we're doing things. That's my first item. My second item gets into the ticking of the boxes. And we received a very good letter from former Commissioner Adam Bass about what's going on in the construction world. And I think this ties to the item that Commissioner Carvalho and I discussed a meeting or two ago about buildings, showing up that look absolutely nothing like what was approved. Related to that, we have an ongoing issue of developers not complying with the requirements of their development agreements and the resolutions that we vote to entitle them. And that includes not noticing the neighbors, not having meetings. The big one is the construction vehicles parking on the streets. That is happening everywhere. And I know code enforcement is trying, and they show up at 8 o'clock to see if any of the cars parked there, but the guys know that code enforcement's watching them when they show up at 8 o'clock, and they show up at 8:30, or they move their cars. And this is really impacting our neighborhoods, and I don't know how we deal with it, but I think this is all brought to my mind from the language in this thing about encouraging, noticing from the developers. I'm sorry, it's a joke. It's just never going to happen. We can't get them to do the things that they're required to do. The project around the corner from me didn't provide a parking plan for 13 months. And it was only after I called and emailed that we get finally a parking plan, which The first one that was submitted was completely unenforceable. It was parking in a lot that didn't even have access for vehicles. So these are things that, we can say all we want, we can write all these things, but if they're not being enforced, we say up here, and we heard it from Adam all the time, oh, call code enforcement, oh, call code enforcement. It's not happening. And I know that's not planning's department, but this is all part of our community, and it's all part of what's happening. And I'm bringing it up for all of us to start thinking about better ways to do this and to make life better in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to comment? Commissioner Matos.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep my remarks heartfelt but brief. This tragedy that struck Los Angeles has claimed the lives of about 27 people so far, with several unaccounted for. It's destroyed lives, property, and people. But we've seen our community come together in a really meaningful way to help our neighbors in the Palisades and our neighbors in the Eaton fire over in Altadena. So I would just ask that we adjourn in memory of the lives lost in the fire, because material possessions can be replaced, but lives cannot. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Matos. I completely agree. And, it's been a challenging week for our community and the city at large. Commissioner Solomon, I think, also has something to add.
Yeah, reiterating some of the points that have been made. I know it's obviously been a horrific week. We all take kind of our personal anecdotes and lessons from it. And one thing that I take away from it is the city has been designed in such a way that the only place to go was out, and a decision was made to not go up. And we have had so much sprawl where homes have been developed in what is the wildlife urban interfacing areas. And to me, it speaks to a moment in time where we can think about how it is that we are building out our city. The city of West Hollywood is 1.9 square miles, and it's been historically dense as compared to other areas, but our density has not changed in 20 years. I'm sure staff is compiling our housing element annual progress review, which I hope is submitted to the Planning Commission to review. But I mean, the state has told us at a minimum to build 4,000 units in 8 years, and we are woefully far behind on the 2023 numbers. I'd be curious to see if 2024 got any better. My guess is that it didn't. So I think that, I'm a part of this commission because I believe in building more housing and building specifically more infill housing, in going up and not out, and legalizing more homes and making those homes as easy to build as possible. So that's why I'm here, and that's where my head will be on matters that come to us going forward in the future.
Thank you. Unless anyone else would like to speak, thank you, Commissioner Matos, for your adjournment. And I know it's been a very challenging week for all, and I can't express enough appreciation for our city and for the fire departments and all of LA County and everyone that's helped out. And I just wish our communities the best. And on that note, I think that's the end of this meeting. So it's now 9:09 p.m. and we'll adjourn this meeting. Thank you. The next meeting, as regularly scheduled meeting, will be Thursday, February 6th, 2025.
We tell story about how to make deep friendship, how to love each other, how to decide to solve any problems with your friends if you can't, for example, to share with somebody. Well, we tell how to share with your friends, how to be happy because of this. We love kids and they are so worried about our